The day my father's will was read, my sister Chloe didn't just steal my inheritance. She stole my past, and she tried to steal my future. I sat on a stiff, leather-backed chair in a law office so quiet you could hear the microscopic scrape of the paralegal's pen on a notepad 2 rooms away. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the kind of suffocating, sterile wealth that always made my skin crawl. Across from me sat my sister, Chloe. She was dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, a performance of grief so polished it was almost admirable. Next to her, her husband, Mark, had a proprietary arm draped around her shoulder, his face set in a mask of solemn support. My mother, Eleanor, was sandwiched between them, looking small and pale, a little rowboat adrift between their two larger ships. I just felt numb. Our father, Arthur Evans, had been gone for 6 weeks. It was a brutal, fast-moving cancer that had taken him from a robust, hands-on contractor to a whisper in a hospital bed in less than a season. He was the foundation of our family. He was the one who built things. I had inherited his quiet hands, his patience, his love for blueprints and order. Chloe, my older sister, had inherited our mother's flair for the dramatic, her social ambition, and a ruthless pragmatism that our father had always tried, gently, to soften. As you all know, Mr. Abernathy, a lawyer I'd never seen before, began, adjusting his glasses. Arthur was a meticulous man. He updated his affairs shortly before his passing to ensure his wishes were perfectly clear. I shifted. This was new. Our family lawyer for 30 years had been a man named Sam Peterson, a fishing buddy of my father's. This new man, Abernathy, had the predatory stillness of a heron. Chloe let out a small, preemptive sob. Mark squeezed her shoulder. "I'll get to the primary bequest," Abernathy said, his voice a dry monotone. The family home on Crestview Drive and the entirety of the Evans contracting assets, along with the associated investment portfolio, are to be placed in a trust. I nodded, expecting the next words to be managed and split equally between his children, Liam and Chloe Evans. That was the promise. That was the mantra of our entire childhood. "You two are a team," Dad would say, ruffling my hair. "You share the burden, you share the reward, 50-50. Abernathy cleared his throat. A trust to be managed by his daughter, Chloe Evans. The contents of the trust, and all its assets, are to be bequeathed to her entirely. The silence that followed was so loud it was like a physical blow. The hum of the fluorescent lights above us seemed to roar. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold, prickling sensation that started in my scalp and ran all the way down to my feet. I must have misheard. I'm sorry, what?" Abernathy looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression unreadable. "Your father left the entirety of the estate to your sister, Miss Evans." "No," I said. "It wasn't a question, it was a statement." "No, that's not possible, that's wrong." Chloe finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but sharp. "Liam, please. This is hard enough." "Chloe, he wouldn't do that," I insisted, my voice rising. "He promised us, 50-50, his entire life he said that." "People change, Liam," Mark interjected, his voice smooth and condescending. "Arthur was worried. He wanted to make sure your mother was taken care of, and he knew Chloe was the one with the financial sense to do it." "And what about me?" My voice cracked. I felt like a child. Abernathy, sensing a scene, quickly continued. "There is a provision for you, Mr. Evans." He rustled the papers. "A one-time bequest of $10,000, and, yes, the contents of his workshop, the tools, the workbench, and his collection of vintage fountain pens." It was an insult. It was a slap in the face so precise, so calculated, it took my breath away. The tools he'd taught me to use. The pens he'd used to sign my report cards, my college applications. He'd left me the props of our relationship while Chloe got the theater itself. I looked at my mother. "Mom, did you know about this?" Eleanor shrank, her eyes darting to Chloe and then back to me. "Liam, your father, he was very sick, he wasn't always himself." Chloe was there every day, she handled everything. "We have to trust that he, knew what was best." She was parroting. I knew my mother's words, and those weren't hers. Those were words that had been fed to her, rehearsed and polished. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a sound like a scream. "Liam, sit down," Chloe commanded, her mask of grief slipping into the familiar, impatient glare of our childhood. I know my father, I said, my voice shaking with a cold rage I didn't recognize. And he would never, ever have done this. I looked at Chloe, and for a split second I saw it. Beneath the tears and the feigned exhaustion, I saw a flicker of something hard and triumphant. I saw the smug, satisfied glint of a game won. I turned and walked out of the office. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the sterile stairwell. I burst out onto the streets of downtown Denver, the cold November air hitting my face, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel anything but the sickening, hollow certainty that my sister, my own blood, had just buried me alive. She hadn't just taken the money. She had taken my father's last words and twisted them into a lie, painting me as a footnote in my own family's history. And the worst part, she had done it so perfectly that she had my mother thanking her for it. To understand Chloe, you have to understand the house on Crestview Drive. It wasn't a mansion. It was a sprawling 1960s ranch that our father had bought as a fixer-upper and spent 30 years turning into a masterpiece. He'd built the deck with his own hands, laid the stone for the fireplace, and planted the oak trees that now towered over the roof. That house was Arthur Evans'. It was his sweat, his love, his legacy, and for as long as I could remember, Chloe had wanted to sell it. She was always the one pointing out the prime real estate value, the outdated fixtures, the suburban sprawl. Chloe was an eagle. She'd left Denver for college on the East Coast and had come back with a sharp haircut, an expensive husband, and a job at Apex Media Group, a high-flying marketing firm downtown. She lived in a sterile, glass-walled condo and viewed our childhood home as a charming but ultimately liquid asset. I was the opposite. I was the rock. After college, I'd stayed. I'd started my own small company, LE Tech Solutions. On paper, it was boring. I did database management and security consulting for mid-level corporations. It was quiet, steady work that I did from a modest office downtown. It paid the bills. It allowed me to live comfortably but simply. But more importantly, it allowed me to spend weekends with my dad in his workshop. While Chloe was networking at galas, I was learning how to restore a miter saw. While she was building her portfolio, I was helping my dad build a new pergola for the backyard. "She's a rocket, your sister," Dad told me once, wiping grease from his hands. He sounded proud, but also tired. "She'll either light up the whole sky or burn out trying. You're the ground, Liam. You're what she's supposed to come home to." He never saw the rot that had set in. He never saw that Chloe didn't want to come home. She wanted to liquidate it. In the weeks after the will reading, I was a ghost. I'd received the check for $10,000, which I left sitting on my kitchen counter, a monument to my own humiliation. I'd also received a box, delivered by a moving company, containing my father's pens and a few of his favorite tools. Chloe hadn't even given them to me herself. I tried to call my mother, but every conversation was strained, filtered through Chloe's new narrative. "Liam, dear, Chloe is having the house appraised," Mom would say, her voice unnaturally bright. "She thinks we can get a wonderful new condo downtown, all on one floor. No more stairs for me. Isn't that thoughtful?" "Mom," I'd plead, "Dad loved those stairs. He built those stairs." "Don't be sentimental, Liam. It's just a house. Chloe says we have to be practical." Chloe says, that phrase became the soundtrack to my grief. Chloe says we need to sell his car. Chloe says his old clothes are just taking up space. Chloe says I'm upsetting you. My best friend, Raj, who is also my informal business partner, was livid. We met at our usual spot, a dark pub that smelled like beer and burgers. "It's forgery, man," he said, slamming his mug down. "It has to be. Your dad cut you out, the man who co-signed your first office lease and told me you were the smartest man in Colorado." "No way." "But how do I prove it?" I said, staring into my untouched beer. "It's his signature on a legal document. Abernathy is Chloe's lawyer, not Dad's. He probably drafted it for her." Sam Peterson, Dad's real lawyer, retired and moved to Florida 2 weeks after Dad died. "It's all too clean. What about your mom?" "She's gone," I said, and the words tasted like ash. "She's so terrified of being alone, and Chloe has convinced her that she's the only one who can protect her. She's a hostage in her own home. So, what are you going to do? Raj asked, leaning forward. Are you just going to let her take it? Let her sell your childhood and kick your mom into some glass box in the sky? I picked up the box of my father's things that I'd brought with me. Inside, nestled on velvet, was his favorite fountain pen. A 1940s Waterman, black and gold. He'd used it to sign every important document of his life. His marriage certificate, my birth certificate, the deed to the house. He was so weak at the end, I whispered, remembering the feel of his frail hand in mine. He could barely hold a cup. You're telling me he signed a complex, multi-page codicil, disinheriting his only son with a steady hand. And why would he? Raj pressed. You're successful, you're stable. It makes no sense. It makes sense, I said, a cold, hard anger beginning to solidify in my chest. If the goal wasn't to provide for mom, but to erase me. Chloe's been a high achiever her whole life, but she was always jealous that I had dad's time, jealous that I understood his work. I thought back to a dinner a few months before dad got sick. Chloe and Mark were there, and Chloe was bragging about a huge new client her firm, Apex, had landed. It's a multi-million-dollar account, Dad, she'd said, sipping her wine. We're talking national campaigns. I'll be a shoo-in for the senior VP position this year. My father had smiled. That's wonderful, honey. Just wonderful. Later, he'd pulled me aside in the kitchen. All that noise, he'd said, gesturing to the living room. It's just noise. Don't ever forget what's real, Liam, the work of your hands, the word you give, the family you protect. That's real. Chloe had heard him. I saw her shadow in the hallway. She hadn't said anything, but her face had tightened. She'd seen his quiet words to me as a slight against her. She didn't just want the money, I said to Raj, a terrible clarity dawning on me. She wanted to win. She wanted to prove to his ghost that she was the one he trusted. She wanted to be the only one. So, fight her, Liam. I can't fight her with sentiment, I said, picking up the heavy Waterman pen. She's insulated herself with lawyers and my mother's grief. I need something harder, something real. I looked at the pen. I knew my father's signature better than my own. I knew the specific German-made blue-black ink he used. I knew the way he'd press harder on the downstroke. Raj, I said, my voice quiet. I need you to find me the best forensic document examiner in the state. The $10,000 check sat on my counter for another week before I finally cashed it. I didn't need the money, but I needed the evidence. The back of that check, with my endorsement, would go into the same file as every other document I was gathering. I hired a man named Dr. Miles, a former FBI specialist in document analysis. He was expensive, quiet, and had eyes that seemed to see the molecular structure of everything he looked at. I gave him the check, a copy of the new will from Abernathy, which was surprisingly easy to get. They were proud of it, and crucially, a stack of my father's old, verified documents. His original will from Sam Peterson, old contracts, even birthday cards. While Dr. Miles worked his magic, Chloe was moving with sickening speed. A for sale sign went up on the lawn of the Crestview house. It was one of those glossy, oversized signs with a glamour shot of the house taken at dusk, the lights blazing. It looked like a hotel. It didn't look like home. Then came the estate sale. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, decided to declutter before the sale. I got an email from a generic estate sale company. You are invited to a pre-sale walkthrough for family members. I went. I had to. When I pulled up to the curb, my stomach churned. The oak trees Dad had planted were still there, but the house already felt hollow. Inside, it was worse. The furniture we'd grown up with, the worn leather recliner Dad watched football in, the dining table where we'd had 1,000 Sunday dinners, was all tagged with bright orange stickers. Chloe was there, of course, directing a team of strangers with the brisk efficiency of a CEO. She was wearing crisp white linen pants and a sharp blazer, her hair pulled back. She looked like she was staging a corporate event. "Oh, Liam," she said, spotting me. Her voice was bright, false. "You made it. Isn't this fantastic? The stagers said we can get at least 10% over asking if we clear out all this. Heavy, dark stuff. Heavy, dark stuff," I repeated, running my hand over the back of Dad's recliner. "You mean his chair? Liam, don't be difficult, it's just things." "They're his things, Chloe. There are things." No, Liam, she said, her voice dropping, the fake brightness vanishing. They're my things, the will was very clear. I'm just letting you have a last look as a courtesy. I saw my mother then, sitting in the breakfast nook, looking out the window. She was drinking tea from a mug I didn't recognize. The colorful, mismatched mugs we'd all used were packed in a box labeled Donate. Mom, I walked over. She flinched, then composed herself. Liam, I wasn't expecting you. Mom, you can't let her do this, this is our home. It's too much house, Liam, she recited, her eyes still fixed on the backyard. The upkeep, your sister is right, it's a burden. A condo will be so much simpler. Does it look simple? I asked, gesturing at the army of strangers tagging every memory we had. This isn't simple, Mom, this is an erasure. Your sister is under a lot of stress, Mom said, her voice weak. She's handling everything. The funeral, the lawyers, the sale, and her big promotion at work. She's up for senior vice president at Apex. It's a huge deal. We should be supporting her. I felt a sharp, bitter bile rise in my throat. She's selling our lives, and we're supposed to support her because she's getting a promotion. Liam, stop. Chloe had walked up behind me. Her voice was a low hiss. You are upsetting Mom. I knew this was a mistake. You can't handle it. You're just like you've always been, stuck in the past, too emotional, no business sense. Business sense? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. You call this business sense? This is a grave robbery, Chloe. That's when she snapped. Her face, so perfectly composed, contorted with a rage that was sudden and terrifying. You're pathetic, she spat, and the estate sale workers paused to look. You're jealous. You're jealous because Dad finally saw the truth. He saw that you were a dead end, a small-time consultant puttering around in his workshop, and I was the one building an empire. He trusted me. He knew I would make the hard decisions. You'd have just let this place rot, just like you're letting your own life rot. Every word was a hammer blow, and she said it loud enough for everyone to hear. The whispers started. The neighbors who had come to help and to snoop were looking at me with pity. I was the failed son, the disappointment. Get out, she said, her voice dropping to a cold, flat line. Get out of my house. My house. I looked at my mother one last time. Mom, are you going to say anything? Eleanor put her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. She was terrified of Chloe's anger, terrified of the truth, terrified of being alone. And in that moment, she chose the path of least resistance. She looked away from me and back out the window. She chose. And she didn't choose me. I walked out. I didn't look back. The first crack wasn't just the lie. It was the realization that my mother was going to let it happen. I wasn't just fighting my sister. I was fighting the ghost of the family I thought we were. I got in my car, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't put the key in the ignition. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Dr. Miles. The subject line was simple, report attached, we should talk. I opened it. It was a 20-page document full of high-resolution image comparisons, chemical analyses, and dense, technical prose. But I skipped to the summary. In conclusion, the signature of Arthur Evans on the codicil dated October 4th is a forgery. It is a high-quality, traced forgery, but it displays none of the microscopic striations or pen lift habits consistent with the subject's known, authentic signatures. Furthermore, the ink used is a standard Pilot Jitwo gel ink, commercially available. The ink used on all known authentic documents is a German-made, iron gall-based fountain pen ink. The documents are, in my professional opinion, fraudulent. I closed my eyes. It wasn't relief I felt. It was a profound, bone-deep cold. I had the proof, but proof of a crime didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a death. The sister I thought I had, the family I loved, they were gone. The person who remained was a stranger, a criminal. And as I sat there, in front of the house I was no longer welcome in, I knew that the law wasn't enough. A courtroom battle would be long, public, and ugly. It would destroy what little was left of my mother. Chloe had used humiliation as a weapon. She had painted me as a failure. She wanted to play business. She wanted to talk about hard decisions and empires. Fine. I started the car. I knew exactly what I had to do. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. I threw myself into my work, but it was a different kind of work. I was no longer just Liam Evans, the quiet tech consultant. I was Ellie, the silent owner of Ellie Tech Solutions, which was, as I'd told no one, a holding company. While Chloe was busy liquidating our father's legacy, I was liquidating some of my own assets. I worked with Raj, my only confidant, in the sterile quiet of my real office, a place Chloe didn't even know existed. It was a sleek, minimalist space on the top floor of a downtown building, miles away from the modest, rented cubicle farm office I used as my front. "The house," I said to Raj, one late night, the city lights twinkling below us. "She sold it, the sale closed on Friday. She got over asking, a developer from California." "Liam, Raj scrubbed his face. "That's it then, it's gone." "She's hosting a dinner," I said, ignoring him, staring at the email invitation on my screen. I was, inexplicably, still on the family email list. "She's calling it a new beginnings celebration. At the Palace, the most expensive, obnoxious restaurant in Denver, she's celebrating selling our home and her pending promotion. She's rubbing it in your face." "She's not just rubbing it in," I said, a strange, cold calm settling over me. "She's building her new narrative. She's the dutiful daughter, the savvy businesswoman, the new matriarch. She's invited everyone, our aunts, uncles, cousins, even Aunt Clara." Aunt Clara was our father's older sister, the true matriarch of the family. Sharp as a tack, and the only one who had called me after the will reading. "Something smells rotten in Denmark, Liam," she'd said, her voice crackling over the phone. "Your father wasn't a fool. And he wasn't cruel." "Liam, you can't go to that dinner," Raj said, looking at me with real concern. "It's a public execution. She's going to toast to Dad's wishes, and you'll be the bitter, failed son in the corner. Don't give her the satisfaction." "I have to go," I said. "It's the only way. She wants an audience. I think it's time she had one." "What are you going to do? Stand up and read the forgery report? She'll just call security. She'll say you're crazy. She'll say it's slander." "No," I said. "I'm not going to bring the report. I'm not going to talk about the will at all." "Then what?" I looked at him. "I'm going to congratulate her." The night of the dinner, I stood in front of my mirror. I wasn't wearing my usual uniform of jeans and a button-down. I was wearing a suit, not just any suit. A bespoke, midnight blue Zegna that I'd had for years, but had never worn in front of my family. It was a suit I wore for billion-dollar negotiations with Japanese tech firms, not for family dinners. When I walked into the private room at the palace, the chatter stopped. Chloe at the head of the table looked magnificent. She was in a glittering, silver dress, her hair in a perfect, sleek updo. Mark was beside her, his chest puffed out. My mother was there, wearing a new string of pearls, looking happy for the first time in months. The whole family was there, 15 people, all sipping champagne. Chloe's eyes raked over me, and her smile faltered for a second. This was not the broken, pathetic Liam she had thrown out of her house. "Liam," she said, recovering instantly, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I'm so surprised you came. We're so glad you're here. Aren't we, everyone?" There was a murmur of uncomfortable agreement. Aunt Clara just watched me, her dark eyes missing nothing. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice even. I took the one empty seat at the far end of the table. The dinner was an agonizing performance. Chloe and Mark dominated the conversation, talking about the fabulous condo they'd found for Mom. They talked about the brilliant deal they'd gotten on the house. Chloe's name was dropped constantly in relation to her job. "My team at Apex. When I'm senior VP. The board is just so impressed." I ate my food. I was silent. I was a stone. Finally, after dessert, Chloe stood up, tapping her glass. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she gushed. "It's been such a difficult few months. Losing Dad was the hardest thing I've ever been through." She dabbed her eye. "But I knew I had to be strong. For Mom. I knew I had to honor Dad's final wishes, to take the burden of his legacy and grow it, to be practical. He trusted me, and I can't tell you what that means." She raised her glass. "And now, with the new condo secured for Mom, and, well, I don't want to speak too soon, but my promotion at Apex is all but official. It feels like we're finally moving into the light." She smiled, a blinding, triumphant smile. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," the room echoed, except for me, and I noticed Aunt Clara. All eyes went to me. I was still seated, my glass untouched. Liam, Chloe said, her voice hardening, won't you toast with us? To Dad's legacy. This was it. This was the breaking point. The public humiliation she had engineered. I was to either toast her, validating her lie, or make a scene and prove I was the bitter, jealous brother. I stood up slowly. The room went silent. Chloe, I said, my voice clear and carrying easily in the hushed room, that was a beautiful speech. She smiled, relaxing. She thought she'd won. You've done an incredible job, I continued. All this business sense, as you call it, handling the estate, the sale, and this promotion. Senior Vice President at Apex Media, that's a huge deal. Well, thank you, Liam, she said, preening. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. I am, I said. I really am. In fact, I'm so impressed that I've been thinking about your company a lot lately, Apex Media Group. A flicker of confusion in her eyes. What about it? It's a good company, I said, walking slowly around the table, my hands in my pockets. A little over-leveraged in its last quarter, and the client retention rate is a bit shaky, but the fundamentals are strong. Good assets, good talent like you, Mark scoffed. Liam, what are you talking about? Over-leveraged, what would you know about it? I know, I said, because as of 6 months ago, my boring little consulting firm, LE Tech Solutions, completed a quiet majority stake acquisition of Apex Media's parent company, RGM Holdings. The silence was no longer quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked all the air from the room. Chloe's face went white. Not pale, white. What did you say? She whispered. I stopped directly behind her chair. I leaned down, my voice no longer for the room but just for her. I said, I own the company, Chloe, the board you're so impressed with. They report to me, the CEO you love, he takes my calls. And that senior VP promotion you're so excited about? I paused, letting the horror sink into her. We have a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. You, me, and Mr. Harrison, the CEO. I had to reschedule it. I hope that's not an inconvenience. We have so much to talk about. I straightened up and looked at the stunned, silent family. I'm so sorry, everyone, I said, my voice returning to normal. I seem to have interrupted the celebration. Please continue. I looked at Chloe's frozen, terrified face. I'll see you at 9. Don't be late. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the wreckage of her triumph. The breaking point wasn't mine. It was hers. The next morning, I was in my real office, the penthouse suite, at 8 o'clock am. When I'd started LE Tech Solutions, I'd had a knack for one thing: security. Not just cybersecurity, but financial security, structural security. I helped companies find their vulnerabilities. And in doing so, I learned to spot vulnerabilities in the market. My first big payout came from developing a security protocol that a Silicon Valley giant bought for a small fortune. I hadn't spent it. I hadn't bought a fancy car or a glass condo. I'd done what my father had taught me. I'd invested it. I'd bought land. I'd bought shares. And then I'd started buying companies. Small, distressed tech and media firms that bigger players overlooked. My boring consulting firm was a front. A perfect, unassuming, middle-class cover. I was quiet, I was steady. I was the ground, just as my father had said. And I had become very, very wealthy, not by being loud, but by being invisible. Apex Media Group had been a strategic acquisition. RGM Holdings, its parent company, was failing. I'd swept in, bought a 60% controlling interest for pennies on the dollar, and installed my own people on the board, all while remaining a silent majority partner. I let the existing CEO, Harrison, stay on, with the understanding that he now worked for me. I hadn't even known Chloe worked there. Not until that family dinner, months ago, when she'd bragged about her job. The realization had been a quiet, electric shock. I'd checked the employee files. There she was, Chloe Evans, a high performer, ambitious, ruthless, and according to her internal reviews, not a team player. I'd just watched. I hadn't interfered. It was a strange, godlike feeling, watching my sister's life through the prism of quarterly reports, not knowing this bizarre connection would soon become the only weapon I had. At 8:55 am, my assistant buzzed. Mr. Harrison and Miss Evans are here. Send them in. The door opened. Mr. Harrison, a man in his late 50s, walked in, his face ashen. He knew. I'd called him last night after the dinner. Chloe followed him. She looked terrible. She hadn't slept. Her makeup was caked on, a desperate attempt to cover the dark circles. The glittering confidence from the night before was gone, replaced by a brittle, frantic energy. Liam, she said, trying to force a smile. This is insane. This is some kind of sick joke, right, you? You work in tech, you don't. Please sit down, Chloe, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. Harrison took the one furthest away, wanting to be as far from the blast radius as possible. She sat. Her eyes darted around the office, the original Rothko on the wall, the view of the entire front range, the sheer scale of the room. How? She whispered. I work hard, Chloe, I said, leaning back in my chair. I don't talk about it. It turns out, puttering around is quite profitable. So, what is this? She snapped, her fear turning to anger. You're going to fire me, is that it? After all my work. After I landed the biggest accounts this firm has ever seen. You can't. The board, I interrupted gently, is my board. And no, I wasn't going to fire you. Why would I fire one of my top performers? A tiny flicker of hope in her eyes. Then what is this? This, I said, is a performance review and a character review. You see, Mr. Harrison, I said, turning to him. Apex Media, like all my companies, has a very strict, non-negotiable morality clause in its executive contracts. We can't have people in leadership positions who engage in, let's call it gross misconduct. It's bad for the brand. Misconduct, Chloe said, her voice rising. I have given everything to this company. You're a great marketer, Chloe, I agreed. You're fantastic at building a brand, a narrative. You're so good. You even did it to our own family. I slid a file across the desk. It wasn't my business portfolio. It was Dr. Miles's forensic report. She stared at it, not touching it, as if it were a snake. Open it, I said. She did. Her hands were shaking. She read the summary. I watched the last bit of color drain from her face. I saw her eyes scan the images, the side-by-side comparison of Dad's real signature and her fake one. It's a lie, she whispered, but the words had no conviction. It's fake, you. You paid him to say this. He's the top man in his field, Chloe. He's a former FBI analyst. His word is, well, it's a bit more real than yours right now. He'll testify in court. And so will the ink specialist. And so will Sam Peterson, who I flew back from Florida last week. He's very clear, Dad never would have made that change. He was heartbroken when he heard. Chloe just stared at the report. The truth was there in black and white and high-resolution ink analysis. She was trapped. What do you want, Liam? She finally said, her voice dead. Money, you have money, what? What is this for? What do I want? I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. I want to know why. Why? She laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. You want to know why, because I deserved it. I was the one who was there. I was the one handling the nurses, the doctors, the bills, the dying, while you were in the workshop, remembering the good times. I was the one who held his hand when he was terrified. I was the one who managed Mom's breakdown. I did the work, Liam, the hard, ugly work. And what were you? You were just the sentimental one, the favorite. I wasn't the favorite, Chloe, I was just. There you were, she screamed, standing up. He loved you more, he was proud of me, but he loved you. He gave you his time, he gave you his hobbies, he gave you his self. What did I get? I got that's wonderful, honey, now run along. I got a pat on the head, he owed me, that house, that money. It was the least he could do to finally pay me for my time. The confession hung in the air, raw and ugly and unbelievably sad. She hadn't done it for the money. She'd done it out of a lifetime of perceived neglect. She had stolen our father's legacy as payment for a love she felt she was never given. He didn't love you less, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet. He knew you didn't need him. Not like I did, he thought you were strong. You were his rocket, you were already in the sky, I was still on the ground. He was trying to teach me how to build. Well, congratulations, she sneered, her face a mask of tear-streaked rage. Looks like you learned. I did, I said, and I also learned this. I turned to Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, Miss Evans is of course a high performer, but this report and her confession. confirms a significant breach of the executive morality clause. Her position at Apex Media is no longer tenable. You'll accept her resignation, effective immediately. Resignation, Chloe choked. You're firing me. I'm giving you a choice, I said, my voice cold as ice. You can resign, quietly. Or I can have security escort you out, and I can send this report not only to the DA for fraud and forgery charges, but also to every executive recruiting firm in the country. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by your narrative building skills. She stared at me, her mind racing, seeing every door slam shut. You bastard, she whispered. No, I said. I'm just the ground, and you, Chloe. You're finally coming home. Chloe's resignation was filed by noon. Mr. Harrison, visibly relieved, handled the internal memo. Chloe Evans has decided to pursue other opportunities. A lie, of course. A final, small professional courtesy that I'd allowed, but I wasn't done. The house, Liam, Raj said to me that evening. We were back in my office. You can't get the house back. She sold it. The sale is closed. It's over. She sold it to Crestview Properties, LLC, I said, looking at a screen. A developer from California. I've been on the phone all day. And Crestview Properties, LLC, I said, a small, tired smile touching my lips, is a subsidiary of a much larger real estate firm. A firm that, as it happens, has been trying to get a zoning variance for a massive downtown project. A project that my holding company has a deciding vote on. You're kidding me, Raj breathed. I had a very persuasive conversation with their CEO this afternoon, I said. I told him the house on Crestview Drive was, let's say, sentimentally significant. I explained that the sale was contested due to fraud, which could tie the property up in legal hell for years. And he decided, as a gesture of goodwill, that the property was more trouble than it was worth. He agreed to sell it to me for exactly what he paid for it plus a convenience fee. So you have it, Raj said, his eyes wide. You have the house back. I have it back, I said, but it didn't feel like a victory, not yet. The final act was not for me. It was for my mother, I called her. Mom, I'm coming over to the condo. We need to talk, and I'm bringing Aunt Clara. When we arrived, Mom was flustered. The condo Chloe had bought for her was beautiful. It was all white and glass, with a stunning view of the mountains. It was also sterile, cold, and had all the charm of a dentist's waiting room. Liam, Clara, what a surprise, Chloe. Chloe isn't here, she's not feeling well, her work, it's so stressful. Sit down, Eleanor, Aunt Clara said, her voice kind but firm. She gestured to the white leather sofa. Mom sat. I sat across from her. Mom, I started, I know the last few months have been confusing, and I know you love Chloe, and I know you're terrified. I don't know what you mean, she whispered, twisting her new pearl necklace, a gift from Chloe. I'm going to tell you the truth, Mom, the whole truth, and it's going to hurt, but you need to hear it, you need to hear it from me. For the next hour, I told her everything. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I laid out the facts. I told her about Sam Peterson. I told her about Dad's fountain pen and the gel pen Chloe had used. And then, I took out the report from Dr. Miles and laid it on the glass coffee table. She stared at it. He wouldn't, she whispered. Liam, no, Chloe, she cried. She was so heartbroken. She was, I said, but she was also ambitious, and she felt like she was owed something. She told me herself, Mom. She said Dad loved me more. My mother's face crumpled. That's not true. He adored her. He was so proud of her. I know, I said, but she didn't. Aunt Clara put her hand on my mother's. Eleanor, look at the report. Look at the evidence. You know Arthur. You were married to him for 40 years in your heart. Did you ever for 1 second believe he would cut his son out? His son. The boy who was his shadow in the workshop. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrible, dawning shame. And the dam of her denial, so carefully constructed by Chloe, finally broke. She let out a sob, a raw, painful sound that came from the deepest part of her. No, she cried, shaking her head, the pearls rattling. No, I knew it. I knew it was wrong, but I was so scared. She was so angry all the time. After he died, she was so in charge, and I was just so lost, and I let her. Oh God, Liam, I let her. She wept, and Aunt Clara held her. I just sat there, feeling the last of the anger drain out of me, replaced by a vast, echoing sadness. What happens now? Mom finally asked, wiping her eyes. Chloe resigned from her job, I said quietly. She's going to be okay, she'll land on her feet. Eventually, and the money. I'm not pressing charges, Mom, I said. I'm not sending her to jail, that's not what Dad would have wanted. The money from the sale, she can keep it. Mom looked shocked. But she stole it. She did. And now she has to live with that. She has her new beginning. She's rich, and she's completely, utterly alone. She has no job, no family who trusts her. And her husband, Mark. I have a feeling he won't stick around now that the Apex Senior VP salary is gone, and her brilliant sister-in-law from hell-in-law is now, well, me. I was right. Mark filed for divorce 3 months later, citing irreconcilable differences. But, the house, Liam, Mom whispered. Our home, it's gone. No, Mom, I said, and for the first time I smiled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, familiar, old-fashioned key. I slid it across the glass table. I bought it back. Her eyes widened. She looked at the key, then at me. I bought it back, I said again. It's in my name now, and it needs a lot of work. The stagers took all the heavy, dark stuff out, it's empty. She picked up the key, her hand trembling. I was thinking, I said, I could really use some help. Deciding on paint, maybe putting some of Dad's old things back, if you wanted to. Her face, so full of grief and shame, softened. A small, watery smile appeared. The recliner. Did you save his chair? It was the first thing I bought back from the estate company, I said. Oh, Liam. She stood up, walked around the table, and pulled me into a hug. It was the first real hug I'd had from her in months. It was a hug that felt like coming home. I'm so sorry, my boy, she wept into my shoulder. I'm so sorry. I know, Mom, I said, holding her. I know, it's over, we're okay. It's been a year. I'm writing this from my father's workshop. The house on Crestview Drive is no longer empty. It's full. It's full of the heavy, dark stuff that makes a house a home. My mother's mismatched mugs are back in the kitchen. My father's recliner is back in its rightful spot. My mother lives here again. She sold the condo at a loss, but she called it a lightning fee. She's different. The grief for my father is still there, but the fear is gone. She's taken up gardening. She's rejoined her book club. She's her own person again, no longer a hostage to her daughter's ambition. Aunt Clara comes for dinner every Sunday. We sit at the old dining table and we talk. We laugh. It's not the same as it was, it's quieter. It's a family that's been broken and reset, and the join is visible. But it's strong. My boring consulting firm is still my boring consulting firm. My wealth is still my secret. I've learned that money is a tool like any other in this workshop. You can use it to build, or you can use it as a weapon. I try, every day, to use it to build. I see Chloe sometimes, from a distance. She lives in a smaller apartment across town. She got a new job, a mid-level marketing position at a much smaller, less glamorous company. She drives a sensible car. She's diminished. The bright, burning rocket has fizzled and fallen back to earth. She's tried to apologize. She's sent emails. She's left voicemails, but they're all about her. I'm working on myself. I'm in therapy. It's been so hard for me. She's never once just said, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I betrayed Dad. My mother sees her occasionally for a strained coffee. She's trying, Mom tells me, her voice hopeful. I know, I say, and I do hope she finds peace. But forgiveness is a different country, and I'm not ready to get a visa. Last week, I was cleaning out the last of my father's old desks. Tucked in the back of a drawer, I found a small, leather-bound journal. It was his. Most of it was just notes on contracts, measurements, wood prices. But the last entry, dated just a few days before he went to the hospital for the last time, was for me. It was written with his Waterman fountain pen, the blue-black ink clear and strong. Spoke to Chloe today, she's all about the money, worried. She shines so bright, but I worry it's all heat and no light. Liam, he's the quiet one. He's the oak, he doesn't need the sun, he just needs the ground. He'll be the one to last, he'll be the one to hold us all together. I closed the journal, the smell of old paper and ink filling my lungs. He'd seen it. He'd known. He hadn't changed his will because he'd trusted me to be the ground. He trusted me to weather the storm. Chloe believed that what people saw was all that mattered. She built a beautiful, shining life on a foundation of lies. But a lie can't hold weight. It always cracks. She forgot that the universe has its own accounting, that every action has a reaction. She thought she was the star of the story, but she was just a chapter. In the end, karma doesn't forget anyone. It just waits until you're at the very top to send you the bill.